Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, David Benavidez defeats Caleb Plant and Kenny Bayless to win a 12-round unanimous decision. In doing so, he retains his WBC interim title at 168. And, at 168, he is in pole position for a Canelo Alvarez fight. Now this fight, in many ways, it went how I kind of expected it to go. The only thing was, I was expecting a David Benavidez stoppage, but the pattern of this fight kind of went how I was expecting. That being Plant winning the early rounds when he was quick, agile, fresh, but eventually Benavidez claws his way back into the fight and starts to take over in the second half. And that's how this fight went. Benavidez just couldn't secure a late stoppage like I predicted. Having said that, I think Caleb Plant's tactics to get to the 12th round or to get to the decision, I think those tactics were very disappointing. He got his 22-foot ring in the negotiations, and he was using every part of that ring to essentially run around and not engage with David Benavidez. And listen, I didn't expect Plant to just stand in front of Benavidez, don't get me wrong, but I felt there would be times when Plant would try to fight fire with fire, when he would try to light Benavidez up. I thought he was going to try to get Benavidez's respect by catching him with some good shots, but early on in this fight, Caleb Plant was content to run around. Every time Benavidez got close or Caleb Plant felt uncomfortable, he would immediately get into a clinch, initiate a clinch with Benavidez, and Caleb Plant was doing that throughout this fight, every single round, initiating clinches. Kenny Bayless said absolutely nothing. For me, Caleb Plant should have been warned in rounds 4 or 5 for his consistent holding, and then after that, maybe have points deducted because I felt it was egregious, to be honest. Caleb Plant in the early rounds, first sort of 4 or 5 rounds, he was definitely the sharper of the two. He was more active with his jab. He was varying the jab from body to head. He had a much better understanding of distance early on. Caleb Plant was also looking for a sweeping right hand to the body against Benavidez, and that shot was landing as well. And early on, Caleb Plant was boxing on the back foot in this fight. And for the first 5 rounds, Caleb Plant was definitely... I don't want to say he was in control because when I was watching it live, I felt there was a lot of nervous energy from Caleb Plant, and he was burning up a lot of stamina because of that. But he was winning the rounds early on. Benavidez was guilty of following him around the ring without really cutting it off. Benavidez's gauging of distance in the early rounds was off. So many times I saw Benavidez try to throw his straight right hand, and he would just fall short. Same with the jab as well. He just couldn't get his distance right in the first 4 or 5 rounds. And Caleb Plant was able to pick at him with the jab. The jab from body to head. Occasionally Plant would throw a little combination to the body, left hook to the head. He was just really outboxing Benavidez early on. And he was frustrating Benavidez in those rounds. There were moments in this fight where Benavidez would point to the centre of the ring, asking Plant to have a tear-up, that sort of thing. There were signs of frustration on Benavidez. He was stifled by Plant's tactics in this fight in the first sort of 5 rounds. The movement, the elusiveness, the holding, etc. You could see the frustration on Benavidez's face. And to be honest, he should be able to mask that a lot better, have a better poker face. But regardless, once this fight got to the 6th round, you could see that the tide was turning. Caleb Plant, he was doing a lot of moving in the first, 5 rounds. However, from round 6 onwards, he was then engaging in a lot more clinches than he was doing previously. Honestly, I think he was finding it tough to consistently move like he was, so the clinch was a bit of a safe space for Caleb Plant. That's one thing I didn't like from Benavidez in this fight. I wanted to see Benavidez act a bit rougher in the clinch, try to utilise the free hand, etc. But again, Plant was allowed to clinch, and Kenny Bayless would break them up relatively quickly, so they couldn't work out of it, which of course up close like that would have favoured Benavidez, but Kenny Bayless, the guy just, let Caleb Plant clinch, then a couple of seconds later he'd break it up. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh on Benavidez there, with his lack of action in the clinch. But regardless, Benavidez had more success in round 6, and this would, change the tide of this fight. Benavidez would start to find a home for his uppercut, which is actually quite a good punch for when you're fighting a clincher. When they fall in, sometimes you can time those sort of fighters with the uppercut. And Benavidez's uppercut was working throughout the second half of this fight. Plant was still relatively elusive in round 6, but I felt the effectiveness of his boxing started to decrease, started to hold more. He was still awkward, but he wasn't able to as easily negate what Benavidez was trying to do. And ultimately, it would then go downhill from there for Caleb Plant. And quite frankly, after the 5th round, I don't think Caleb Plant won a round. I didn't give Plant a round after round 5, so round 6 onwards, I gave all to David Benavidez. And quite frankly, it was a mission of survival for Caleb Plant. He was only there to survive, and quite frankly, he didn't give enough resistance to David Benavidez. Never gave David Benavidez anything to think about. Occasionally, he would try to answer exchanges with 2 or 3 of his own punches, but, when he did land some good shots, they would just bounce off Benavidez, really. He did land some good shots in the second half of this fight, but, they was just too few and far in between. And again, he allowed Benavidez to maraud forwards. You could tell that Plant's legs were going because Benavidez's jab was getting a lot closer as he was coming forwards. He wasn't falling short to the extent in which he was. The jab was starting to catch Caleb Plant, as was the lead right hand to the body from the outside from Benavidez. And yeah, the last 6 rounds was really just Benavidez doing what Benavidez does, marching Plant down and slowly starting to beat him up. The last 3 rounds of this fight were pretty, they were very one-sided. I mean, for me, it looked like Plant was hurt on more than one occasion in the last 3 rounds. His face was bloody and battered, swollen, etc. He was catching a bit of a beating in the last 3 rounds. Benavidez was able to put some good combinations together, uppercut combinations, chopping hooks around the side, some good body work here and there. In fact, when Benavidez did go to the body, they were real hard, sickening shots. But again, Benavidez waited till like rounds 7 or 8 to start going to the body in this fight. Should have tried to go to the body a lot earlier, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, round 12, Caleb Plant tried to come out and fight fire with fire. He actually did land some good shots on Benavidez in round 12, but he was just getting outworked by Benavidez. When Plant would land 2 punches in a sequence, Benavidez would come back with 4. But round 12 had a couple of really fun exchanges, especially at the end of the rounds. And yeah, Plant tried to pull something out of the fire, but he couldn't do it. And yeah, Benavidez won a unanimous decision. Now, for me, this fight was a clear 8-4 type of win for David Benavidez, 8 rounds to 4. I felt Plant won rounds 1, 2, 4, 5, and I gave everything else to David Benavidez. For me, Caleb Plant and his approach was far too negative, far too much holding, and quite frankly, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of praise for his performance. I mean, I guess he showed some toughness, I'll give you that, but if this fight was properly officiated, Caleb Plant gets knocked out. In my opinion, he gets stopped. Bayliss just allowed Plant to do so much in this fight, so much holding. It was unbelievable. I mean, there was a moment in round, I think it was either round 8 or round 9, when it looked like Benavidez had hurt Caleb Plant. Plant was looking uncomfortable, and for some reason, I don't know why, I really don't know why, the referee called break for some reason. Just weird shit like that. All of that sort of stuff was in favour of Caleb Plant, just weird little things. To me, it looked like Kenny Bayliss had a bet on Caleb Plant, or something like that. But yeah, to me, if this fight was properly officiated, I think Benavidez would have got him out of there late, to be honest. Post-fight, I'm seeing a lot of people praise Caleb Plant's performance, praising his toughness. Yeah, he showed a bit of toughness, I'll give him that. But I don't think his performance is anything to be praised. You know, this was a big pay-per-view event in Las Vegas. And he for the first 4 or 5 rounds, he was running around, not engaging, negative, passive, trying to steal rounds, which he was doing successfully. And in the second half of this fight, he was just in survival mode. Really? Is that really what we expect from a pay-per-view fighter? I mean, these beta passive type of performances are just so accepted now in boxing. They're praised. I didn't see what people were seeing in regards to Plants. Yes, early on he was awkward. Yes, he was winning rounds, but I never saw anything impressive in this fight from Plants. I saw a guy who was extremely negative, and in the second half, a guy who was purely there to survive. That's how I saw this fight, and a fight that was terribly officiated. To me, Benavidez dominated this fight. It was never in doubt. I know 8-4 doesn't sound like domination, but in every moment where Plant wasn't running or couldn't spoil, he was basically getting bested. He was getting beaten up. Disappointing tactics from Caleb Plant, I would say. I personally don't believe his performance is as praiseworthy as many are making out. That's how I see it. Maybe I'm being harsh. You guys will have to tell me. As for Benavidez, he wins the fight. UD, I think there's definitely things he needs to go back and look at. You know, how to cut the ring off more effectively, jabbing on the front foot, taking steps to either side while he's applying pressure, that sort of thing, fighting in the clinch, etc. There were aspects of Benavidez's performance that need to improve going forwards, especially if he fights another guy like Caleb Plant, a guy who is on his bicycle holding and spoiling. He needs to be better prepared to fight that sort of style. But yeah, Benavidez moves on, and to me, Benavidez right now is the only viable fight for Canelo at 168. Looking at 168 right now, aside from Benavidez, to me there's no real interesting fights there involving Canelo. Benavidez, yes, Benavidez technically leaves a lot to be desired, but let's say if Canelo Alvarez can't hurt David Benavidez, that's going to be a hard night's work. It's going to be a hard night's work because Canelo doesn't move as well as Caleb Plant. His feet aren't as quick. He's a sharper puncher. He's a more accurate puncher, so there's going to be more coming back for Benavidez to contend with. However, if Canelo can't hurt Benavidez, that's going to be a long night. That's going to be a long night. So that's a fight that needs to happen next at 168. To me, it's arguably the biggest fight out there for Canelo Alvarez. I think Canelo versus Benavidez does better business than Canelo versus Bivol, for example. So that's the fight I'm looking for next. Benavidez versus Canelo. Why not? Let's get it. Anyway, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy. Peace.